My name's Greely Myatt, and I'm originally from Mississippi. I've lived in Memphis 20 years. I was teaching at Arkansas State University. I'd taught there 4 years in the late 80s and came here in '89 to run the sculpture program at the university. So I went to the Mississippi State, and when I got there, I was studying history. I realized really quickly that what I was interested in were the paintings that illustrated history, and I was just taken by them. So I realized it was art. But I transferred to Delta State in Cleveland, Mississippi, which at the time was kind of the most well thought of art department in the state of Mississippi. I took a 3D design class with a man named Floyd Shaman, who was a stone carver. And he was a sculptor, and he didn't get to teach enough sculpture probably, so he would teach sculpture really in 3D design. And we carved a stone. You know, one day this thing was a rock, and 2.5 months later, I was pretty slow at it. It was an e-books and a ram that was kind of curled up on itself. So, you know, I had never felt that kind of accomplishment. I mean, you know, from there on, I became a sculptor. Work I make now begins with the idea. What kind of form it takes follows that idea. You want your art to say something. The phrase, "What are you doing?" It's the question I hate most as an artist when someone asks that, because it's pretty hard to say it in a quick enough way for them to not get bored and regret asking it. My art comes out of my neurosis, but the trick in order to get somebody to care is to make them think it's about their neurosis. Does that make sense? But you know, it's personal, but it has to go to the universal, and that's not easy to do. I had this idea to do these quilts, and so I titled the project "Quilts Built on a Tradition," playing on the idea of building rather than sewing, and building on the tradition of quilts, of course, too. My collaborator was my grandmother, who was deceased. So that was an easy collaboration, and we didn't argue at all. I built 5 quilts, and the notion with those were that, one, they would be treated like quilts are in our society. One would be on the wall like a painting, like you'd see it in a museum. One would be on a quilt stand. There's one on a cot that kind of has collapsed the cot because of the weight of it. And then there were some stacked ones. And so that set out the quilt deal. And they were all either made out of painted wood or some metal. None of the painting I did. It was all recycled and to keep that tradition. You know, I like the idea that something has had this life, and now that life is over, and how can we reinvigorate it? You know, you have these ideas, but are they practical, and how do you have to adjust them, you know, to make them work without compromising them? You know, you never have enough money to do it, and you can let that be a reason not to do it, or you can let that be a factor that drives how you do it. I like that struggle. I do. I also like the kind of variety of people I deal with and the kind of range of stuff they're interested in. You know, I think when you start, you pretty much have an agenda that you want to get everybody to get onto. But it seems like the longer you do it, or the longer I've done it, the less sure I am of that agenda. And I think it has to do more to be driven by them, but then the challenge, the job is to get them to realize that they are in a particular place, in a particular time, and that the relationship to what other artists are doing is the way they're measured. So they can't just be expressing themselves. Certainly that's what you do, but you have to do it within a context that's historical and current and informed. I would never say that I'm only doing it for myself. I'm not. I'm doing it for as many people as I can get to respond to it. And I don't care if that response is always positive, you know. I mean, it's fine, just have a response. Love it or hate it, but don't ignore it. Art, you know, it softens our life. And yeah, I mean, how do you live in a world that's just business, you know? it's crucial for us to be able to live as humans, you know. It just makes our lives better. Even art that disturbs you. Because that's what it's for. I mean, it's to, you know, we have to question and see our world different.